Hello and welcome, I'm Dave. In today's lesson, we'll make some final updates and deploy our Next.js Full Stack Project to Vercel. I'll provide a link to all resources in the description. And I'll also provide a link to join my Discord server where you can discuss this Next.js Full Stack project with fellow students, ask questions, and help each other out. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to Sentry for making this full stack Next.js educational video series possible. Sentry is defining debuggability in full stack web applications, and I consider Sentry to be an essential part of my tech stack. From error reporting, logging, and tracking to identifying performance issues with tracing, to user session replays, and much more, Sentry will help you write and ship code that delivers exceptional user experiences. Follow the Sentry links in the video description or just visit Sentry.io and use the code davegray to get 3 months of the Sentry team plan for free. In this Next.js Full Stack Project series, I'm using the same tech stack that I've been working with on a major project at my job over the past year. For viewers, students, and subscribers that have asked what I work with on a daily basis, this is definitely the tutorial series to watch. And today, in our final lesson, we are looking at the user stories for our Repair Shop app, and we can check off all of the checkboxes. We have 3 left. And in the previous tutorial, lesson 12, we completed this where we show a real-time open tickets page because we applied polling, so we're getting that live data at a regular interval to populate our table. So we can check that off. Also, we did a small adjustment in the last lesson to make tablet mode desktop mode we've been looking at the whole time, but tablet mode, say in an iPad, made the app look good in that as well, and we checked out the view in that. And of course, you could do more testing on that. We didn't focus on that too much, but we verified that it looks good on an iPad and functions well. And that React table is responsive also. So if it goes off of the page, of course, it has its own scroll bars. So that works nice, and that's built into React table. And at the very top, as we'll complete the deployment today, we will be replacing the sticky note system that the Repair Shop had been using. This app will be a major improvement over just keeping sticky notes on items as they came into the computer repair shop. So we have completed the user stories for our Next.js Full Stack project. Okay, back in VS Code, and we are ready to change a couple of things on our project before we deploy, and we want to check a couple of things, of course, that will make us change those things. Let's open a terminal window with Control and the backtick, and what I want to do is run an npm audit because we do not want any security vulnerabilities in our deployed project. So we can do that with npm audit, or we could even type report afterwards. Either way, it will deliver the same results. It won't change anything. This is just going to give us a report, and we can check to see if we have any vulnerabilities. And you can see we do. We have 2. One's moderate and one is listed as high. But before we run npm audit fix, we need to discuss that a little bit. Let's look at what we have. So we just have cross spawn and nano ID. Now these are not things that we added manually ourselves. These are dependencies in other things that are in our project, because something we add to our project can have its own dependencies. So with that said, we do want to fix these, but you would want to take more care, especially if this was one of the major additions. Let's say Next.js was listed here, or React table, or one of the major features that we added, one of the major packages that we added to the project. We would definitely want to check that out before we just blindly update those, because we wouldn't want any breaking changes. Now, I think this will be okay to update both of these with npm audit fix. Now, to do that, let's go ahead and do a dry run first, because this is something, I'm not so worried about these 2 projects, but this is something, if you saw an update for something a little bit more major in your project, you would definitely want to do a dry run as well. But let's go ahead and explore that. We'll do npm audit fix, and then we need that -- legacy peer deps, or we're going to have an issue just because of the updates in this project that we've discussed with Next.js 15 and React 19. But now let's also do -- dry -run. And this means it won't actually fix anything. This is just going to show us what it would do if we didn't have a dry run flag. So let's go ahead and press enter. and let's see what it generates here for us. So now we can see what it's going to fix. So up above, here's the NPM audit report that it ran once again, but up above it shows all of these things. Now it looks like it's adding a lot here, but these are for, here's Darwin, FreeBSD, Linux, just different operating systems, Android, but let's see what it lists as changing here. So let's go back up. We don't see any changes there. Let's scroll back down. It should say change somewhere in here at the very bottom. I guess I had gone past it, but it's changing those two we saw that were the vulnerabilities, nano ID and cross spawn. So those are the things we really want to note, and it tells you it's taking it from 3.3.7 to 3.3.8. Now this is semantic versioning, so it goes major, minor, patch. So this is just a patch update here for nano, and really the same for cross spawn, 7.0.3 going to 7.0.6. So we're only seeing the patch digit here change. The middle digit is minor and the left digit is major. So this should be fine to go ahead and run our npm audit fix and fix these vulnerabilities. So let's do that, npm audit fix, and it should patch both of these. Oh, I forgot. See, now I have the error. I forgot to add -- legacy peer deps. We'll go ahead and run this once again, and now it should fix everything. Changed 2 packages, audited 715 packages, found 0 vulnerabilities. Now we can confirm that once again if we want to do npm audit report, or just npm audit again would give us that same result, but we should just confirm that we have 0 vulnerabilities. Now I feel much better about deploying this project. Something else quickly worth discussing about this npm audit fix that we just ran, and that is it does not update your package JSON. So for example, if it told you it was going to update next to a newer version, if there is a newer version than this right now, it wouldn't update the number here, even though it would update that version. So how can you check if your package JSON doesn't list what you actually have installed? Because that can be confusing. So let's go ahead and look at that command that shows what is actually installed. So you could type npm list, then -- depth equals 0. Now let's go ahead, press enter, and see how it lists out the dependencies here. So here we see we have Next at 15.1.1, just for example here, and we have React DOM at 19.0.0, but this actually lists what you have installed. So for example, if you run npm audit fix, you cannot guarantee that your package.json file is listing exactly what you have installed. Part of that is because the package.json is not designed to list exactly what you have installed unless you lock it down. This little caret means it allows updates to the minor version and to the patch version. If you only wanted to allow updates to the patch, you would put the little squiggly beside it like that instead. And if you wanted to lock it down to a specific version, you would remove both the caret and the squiggly. But I'm going to typically have the caret here, and that's what you would see by default. And that means you can go ahead and update to a minor or a patch version that is above what you see in the package JSON. So that's your typical thing. And of course, if you're going to go to a major version, like we went, say, to Next.js 15, let's say your project had 14 before that. So if you're going to go to a major version, really you're probably going to do that at the command line with npm install or npm I, and then say the package name at latest, for example. However, you could update the number here and then run npm install as well, and it would go on up to the next major version if you did it manually in this file. Okay, the next discussion we have is moving from the development environment to the production environment, and we can identify those in Node. And specifically, we need to do one thing in our DB directory here, and then index.ts. And that is because we've been in this development environment the entire time, and we're using our .env.local. Now we'll need to provide Vercel with our environment variable values. So we'll store those in Vercel in our hosting account, but we've been pulling them from this file. And that only happens when we're here in the local development mode. But what we need to do is tell Node.js, essentially our backend here in Next.js, to not do this unless it's in our development mode. So we can do that by saying if, and then we can check process.env.node_env, and then we can say not equals production, as it's kind of suggesting that I do, or we can say if it equals, so I want lowercase here, development, then we're going to go ahead and use this config for the path here. So I'll just cut this and I'll put it right in here. And now it's only going to config this path for our .env.local if we're in development mode like we have been. And I could have done that earlier on in the project and just didn't think about it till we got here to deployment. But this is pretty much a good habit to check to see if you're in development before you would look for those development environment variables. And of course, Next.js is going to pull these from Vercel, so we'll still get the process.env.database URL, for example, in this file, just by providing those to our Vercel hosting account. And I'll show you how to do that along the way as well. Another setting I want to point out before we deploy is our Sentry settings. And if we scroll down, we have 3 Sentry config files. Let's look in the first one. You'll find this in all of them. But here it says set tracesSampleRate to 1.0 to capture 100% of transactions for tracing. Previously in this series, we did set up a trace and we were just checking out the performance with the span, if you remember that. But here it says we recommend adjusting this value in production. So really, when I first deploy, I may leave it here if I'm wanting to check anything else with a span, just check usage in different areas or how it's performing. However, later on, at some point, you may want to drop it more to like 0.2, which would be 20% instead of 100%. Just for example, right now, I'm going to go ahead and leave this at 1.0. And as I mentioned, this is in each one of these config files where you could change it as well. So just wanted to highlight that before deployment. Now let's move on to discussing ESLint, and we're going to do a build and check out what errors we might get from ESLint. We told our project we wanted to use ESLint when we first started it, if you remember those questions that Next.js asks you when you start a project. So our ESLint config here it's our .json file really. You can see it's ESLint rc.json over here in the file tree. It's very simple right now, but we might want to put in an exception or two. But first, let's just see what build errors we get. We're very likely to get a few unexpected build errors. So it would be good to go ahead and do npm run build. And now this build directory, if we check the git ignore, it should be excluded by default. Yep, /build for production here. That won't go to our Git repository. So we just want to verify that. But let's go ahead, run this, and it will create that directory and create a build, but it will also generate any errors. And I do expect to get some errors as we run this npm build. So I'll go ahead and go to the end of this. We won't wait for it to do the whole build or find all of the errors while this is happening, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, npm run build finished running, and our build did fail as I expected, and we have some errors highlighted here in the terminal. One thing I also want to point out is this info line. If you want to learn more about ESLint rules, you can follow this URL right here. We're going to go over a few of those. Let's scroll up and see what we had. We also have some warnings here. And once we get to the top, we have this note, well, not all the way to the top. There's a lot that happened. Sentry logs a lot of things here too, but we failed to compile. So once we see that, now we start to see a list of errors. The nice thing about this list is it tells us the file that the error is in, and it even tells us what line number it's on, like line 43 right here. And then it tells us the ESLint rule. Here it says TypeScript-ESLint / no unused vars, meaning variables. So we've got router assigned in this file, but we're not using it any longer. So let's look at our customer table in the RS directory, and on line 43, we should find router. So I'm going to scroll up here, go into our app directory, RS directory, customers, and then customer table. Let's close the terminal. And now we want to be on line 43. right here, look, we have router defined, but we can see just by the color it is here in VS Code, we're no longer using it. We must have been using it somewhere else in the file. So let's go ahead and select it, Control C, Control F. Yep, it says 2 of 3. So here's 1, 2, and probably the import is 3. So wherever we were using it before, we're no longer using it. So we can remove that. And we can remove the definition here, now on line 42. And that should be fixed. And of course, we don't want to run the build every time we fix something. So let's just continue down the line, and then we'll eventually run it again. Now here it says in our customer form, so another file dealing with customers, error is defined but never used. Once again, the no unused variables rule here. So we want to look inside of customers and the form directory, customer form. So now in the form directory, customer form, see what line that was on once again? That was on line 93 here of the customer form. So if we scroll down just a little bit, we can see that yes, where we have our use action hook, we defined on success and on error. We were destructuring the error here, but we never actually used it in our toast message or anywhere else. So we can just delete that. Whoops, I did a little too much, but here we can just delete that out of the on error function and save, and that's all we really need to do to fix that. Okay, let's look at the next one. Then we have our page.tsx inside of the form directory of the tickets segment. Optional chain expressions can return undefined, and that says using a non-null assertion, is unsafe and wrong. Well, that's a little harsh, isn't it? We could use that if we wanted to, but we could also change it. And this is under the rule, no non-null asserted optional chain. What a very specific rule that is. And you can see we've got it twice, actually. It's here on line 111 twice. So let's take a look at that by going to the tickets. We can close these others. And we'll open up tickets, and then we want to go to the form directory and to the page.tsx, go to line 111. So here we are. We might have to actually, yep, we're going to hide the file tree and then Alt-Z to wrap the code down just so we can see it all here on line 111. Our non-null assertion is right here. You see the exclamation mark. That is a non-null assertion. And we actually have another non-null assertion right here. As you can see, it wraps down. So they're both after the to lowercase method here as we use the user email value. So if we wanted to use these, we could override that rule or just set it as a warning, for example, inside of our config file there for ESLint. But let's say we want to go ahead and comply with this rule. Well, let's remove these non-null assertions that it is not happy about first. That's going to create another problem with TypeScript as we see down here. So we need to handle this in some way that it knows we have values here without using the non-null assertion. One thing we could do would be to filter those out before we map. So let's put a dot. Oops, we already have a dot, but let's put a filter here. And I'll put a dot after that just so the map is chained. Now inside the filter, we'll have a user, and then for the type here, we'll use a type predicate, which you don't see as often, but we'll say user is, what we're saying is the email is a string, and then after that we'll have our function for the filter, and here we can say type of user.email equals string. So what we're doing with this type predicate here is saying that when the filter is true, when our evaluation here is true, then this type is true. So then the email is a string. So now we don't have an error down here below as we pass text after we've defined the text, but we got away from those non-null assertions by putting that filter in here with the type predicate. So that was one way to fix that. Okay, let's go ahead and show the file tree once again and then look at our next error after we had the optional chain here, which we got rid of both of those non-null assertions. So no problem there. Now we're back here at the ticket or in the form directory in the ticket form, and we have once again error is defined and not used. So that's something we've seen before. That's on line 69. Let's go ahead and scroll to line 69 in the ticket form. And once again, we can see an error being destructured here in the onError callback of the use action hook. And of course, it wasn't being used. So we can just get rid of that. Going back and looking, now we have a couple of warnings, but it would be nice to get rid of these warnings too. And this is for our dependency array in use memo on line 66 in the ticket table component. So this is something I think I put in some ignores for this because we discussed those as we went, and maybe I just forgot to put in that ESLint ignore line that you can put in for these. So let's go ahead and look at that. It's in tickets and then ticket table. So we'll want to scroll down to line 66. And here we see line 66 right here. And yep, we've got a dependency array. And what did it say about this? You can get several different messages. So it says it's missing one, which is search params. But of course, the search params would be some complex data like an object, and that would cause it to run every time anyway. So we didn't want that in there. And then I think, yeah, it says it has a complex expression because we're actually calling a method in there, but it returns just a static value. So that is what we want to check. So what I want to do is just ignore that. And I believe, let's go ahead and search here in this file. I believe I already had it somewhere else, maybe. Yep. So hide the file tree again, just so you can see it better. Alt-Z to wrap it down. But here is that line. You want to put this either right above or right after. So I'm just putting it on the same line right after. I'll just copy this with Control-C. And now let's go back to line 66 here inside of our component. And right here, I'm just going to paste that same disable ESLint for this dependency array. Save that. Okay. Now let's look at the next. That should have taken care of both of those, by the way. Now our back button says props are defined but never used. Well, this is a mistake. I'm glad they discovered this for us because we need to go back and fix this as well. Let's open the file tree, go to components, and then back button. Components, and then back button right here. And on line 14, it says, yep, on line 14, we have props, but we didn't pass the props to the button. And we can do that just by adding an extra line and in curly braces, going ... props and spread those in. That's what we should have done before, and we just didn't do it. It showed that they were unused. All right, moving on to the next, use toast. So this is something we get from shadcn. We didn't set this up. This is an error that ESLint is detecting, at least in our current version of shadcn. So what we want to do is just ignore or mark this as a warning. And this is the same thing that we caught before, no unused variables. So I think we want to put it as a warning because it really did help us identify some things we could remove from our code. However, I don't want to go into the shadcn use-toast.ts file and make any changes right now. I want to leave that. And of course, we could look at updating it to see if shadcn at some point has changed it. Maybe he has seen this as well. However, for now, we would just want to set this to a warning. And to do that, I'm going to scroll down here in the file tree till we get back to our .eslintrc.json file. And here we have an object essentially, and it says extends. So after this extends line, we want to put a comma. And now let's put in some rules. So we put in rules in quotes. Now we have an object. And here we're going to say at TypeScript, and then it has dash ESLint slash no dash unused dash vars. And here I'm going to say this should be a warning. And really that's all we need to put to make that a warning instead of an error when ESLint runs during our build. There's one more I want to put in here specifically. It's not a big deal, but if you put in, say, an apostrophe instead of escaping that with an HTML entity, if you're familiar with those, that will also cause a build error. And that's not something I like to look for really, because when I'm typing, I like to just put in apostrophes if I need to and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and add this while I'm here. So react/no-unescaped-entities. And this is a rule I typically put in all of my projects. I'm just going to shut that off. Go ahead and save. So we've just put a couple of changes here. So one, you know now how to shut a rule off entirely, or you also know how to change a rule from an error to a warning instead. So we will see a warning now for that action types. If we look back, next time we build, we should see a warning for this, and that's okay. Likewise, our last error here of the list was in our middleware. It says request is undefined but never used. So it's once again that same rule. We can look at our middleware, but I don't really want to remove this request. Yes, it is unused. I could uncomment the console log and then it would be used, but I don't really need that console log in there either. However, I don't want to remove it. I want to leave this structure because this is kind of the structure of how I set up middleware. I decide I need to come back and use it later. I'm going to want to see that request in there. So once again, we'll get a warning for this. We'll get a warning for the shadcn use toast, and I'm okay with both of those when we go ahead and run our npm run build once again, but we should have eliminated all these other warnings and errors, and we can verify that, of course, as we do it. So now let's go ahead and do npm run build once again, and I'll come back once it has completed. And I'm back. We almost made it through our build process, but we once again exited the build process, and we'll take a look at why. But first, let's go back up here. It's going to take just a little bit. Here it is, where we can see where we previously were. Now the build didn't fail. Here we got compiled successfully, so that was great. And then no more errors. We just got a warning for the action types in the use toast file, and we got a warning for the request in the middleware. Both of these were because the variables are not currently used, but we set those to warnings now instead of errors, and that's fine. Now we went ahead and started the rest of the build, but Next.js pre-compiles these files. And what happened was we got to that Sentry example page where we were throwing an error on purpose when we tested it out. And here we have a Sentry test front-end error. So it encountered an error in our code and it stopped the build process. So what we really need to do is go to our Sentry example segment in our project and just remove it, because we don't need that any longer. We tested it out to begin with. So let's go here to our Sentry example route. You can see inside is a page, and I'm just going to delete that from the project. So it's no longer there, should not be an issue now. Let's once again run npm run build, and I'll come back, and hopefully this time it will be successful. And the build process has completed, and now it was successful. So we're getting the full report here from Next.js, and you can see this is kind of where everything stopped before, but now it went through the linting and checking validity of types, collected page data, generated the static pages that are in the project, and built traces, final page optimization, all of these things. And then it lists out everything about our project here. So all very good stuff, all very interesting. But now this code base is complete really for me for lesson 13. So this is what I'm going to push to GitHub that you will find in the lesson 13 branch of the course repository. And from here, we're going to move on to preparing the code base, and I'll break away from these branches that are in the course repository. So just know that right now, this is what I'm going to have in the course repository for lesson 13. And from here, we will move on to preparing the code base. And we are back in VS Code with an empty window. I have the project opened in the file tree over here to the left, and now we're at a fork in the road for preparing the code base. So there's two different possibilities here. One, you've been following along with every lesson. Actually, I should say there's three possibilities. You've been following along with every lesson, and you created a branch in your own Git repository for each lesson. So that is possible that your repository looks just like mine, where you have a branch for each lesson. We're now on lesson 13. Or possibly you've been following along and didn't create a branch for each lesson and just made changes as you went. So you have everything in one branch, like your main branch. And that's really where we want to end up today, because we're using the free hosting at Vercel, and it's not going to support a bunch of different branches like I might set up. I actually think it might support some staging for free hosting as well, but we'll just use the main branch. But if you were on a team specifically, you would have different branches and a staging branch. Of course, you would be checking everything all along the way before production. But today we're just going to use the main branch. Now, a third possibility is you haven't been following along. You're just wanting to deploy the code that I put in GitHub. Now, what you will miss out on are the environment variables and knowing what those values should be and setting up your kind account and different things in the tech stack. So I really hope it's one of the first two possibilities. Either you've been following along and you have all of the code in separate branches, or you've been following along and you have it all just in the main branch. And we would want to get down to the main branch today anyway. But what I'm going to do is show an example of how any one of these possibilities can catch up, and then we can get this project deployed. Except what I'm not going to do is go back and show you how to set up those accounts and everything. Really, if you haven't watched the videos up to this point and somehow you're in chapter 13, you just need to go back and watch the others. Okay, so what I'm going to say here first, let me clear this out. I'm going to say if you have a bunch of branches like I do, so if you would just say git branch and list all the branches, you can see I've got one in here, not only the main branch, but then I've got lesson 1 through 13. You would want lesson 13 to eventually end up being the main branch. So you'd want to delete all the other branches. If you're not familiar about deleting branches, you would want to use git branch -d, which would force the deletion. And then you could say the branch name, such as lesson-1. Now, I'm not going to do that here in my repository, but that's how you could delete a branch. Likewise, you can rename a branch, like you would want to rename lesson 13 to main after you had the other branches deleted. Don't do that until you delete the other ones. But when you only have lesson 13 left, then you would want to say git branch -m and then put whatever the new name is here. So the new name in this example would be main, once you have deleted the other branches, of course. So that's one option, to work from what you already have if you have a bunch of branches like I do. Now, another option would be to get the code from my lesson 13 repository. We'll actually get my full repository and bring it down. So that's what I'm going to show next. Okay, I'm here in GitHub with the Next.js Full Stack Project repository. This is the course repository, and if we scroll down, you can see the README and everything here. It has all of the branches lesson 1 through 13 plus a main branch that we see here. And there's 3 different ways you could really get this code if you're wanting to get a copy of this repository instead of working from something you've built along the way while watching the tutorial. And of course, I don't want to use the course repository for deployment, so I just want to keep this separate. So what I'm going to do is clone this, but what I also want to say is you can fork it. Clicking fork up here, it says fork your own copy. This will put it in your GitHub account, and then you could download it from there. Now, when it comes to downloading it, either from your account or from this repository right here, 2 different things. One is click the code button and choose download zip. So you could do that. I have students that prefer to do that when they're not as comfortable with Git. However, I recommend learning Git and everything about it that you can. What I'm going to do is clone it. So you see this HTTPS right here, and this says clone. I'm just going to copy this URL. I'm going to go back to VS Code, open up a blank folder, and we'll clone this repository into that folder. Okay, I'm back in VS Code now, and you can see I'm in an empty folder. Next 15-deploy is what I named it. So I'm just going to open up a terminal window, and here in the terminal window, I'm going to type git clone, and then I'm going to paste in that URL that I copied from GitHub. This will clone that project now into this folder. So now you can see I have a folder, a directory named Nextjs Full Stack Project. So that is now the entire project that we had on GitHub is now in this folder. Now what I want to do next is just cd into that. We could, of course, open that folder as the parent here, but we'll just stay inside the one I created, and then we'll change directory into it. So cd Nextjs Full Stack project. And now we're in that project, and you can see it says we're in the main branch. I'll type clear just so we get some more room. So we're in the main branch of the project. So it still has all of the branches, and you can see the .git directory here. If you're not seeing a .git directory in your project, that means your preferences in VS Code are set to hide it. So you can go here, and then from this menu, you should be able to choose, let me find maybe under File. I scroll down a ways in File, Preferences, there we go, and then Settings. And that's also just pressing the Control comma at the same time will open the settings. Once you get to Settings, you want to start typing the word File. And then I just typed File. I didn't even have to type anymore. And Files : exclude comes up, and it has a pattern in here. Now, if this is showing already a pattern that is hiding your .git directory, you can remove that just by clicking the X by that pattern. So I am not hiding my .git directory. I always want to know if it is there. So let's close Settings now. Now that we know we have the .git directory, let's talk about what happened after we cloned the project. Right now, I'm on the main branch, and if I type git branch, it really only shows the main branch, as if that's all that I downloaded. Well, it kind of is and kind of isn't, because I have a link to all those other branches still. If I type git branch -a for all, now it shows all of these remote branches that are still connected to this repository. So that's handy. Let me see if I can just type Q here to quit. There we go. And now, after that, what I want to do really is get to the 13th branch, lesson 13. I can do that with git switch lesson 13, just as if I was working with the repository before. Now, notice I got all the files over here in the file tree to the left. I'm on branch lesson 13. That had our final code. Now from that, let's once again type git branch and see what it lists. Now it doesn't just list the main, it also lists lesson -13. So now we've got that. And really, that's all we want. I just want the completed code. I don't want the other chapters. Don't even want the main branch that we previously had. I just need lesson 13 because it has the completed project in it. So what I'm going to do now is remove the Git folder entirely. And when you do that, you're still going to keep the current working branch. So you're going to have all the files that are in the current branch that you're on. So I'm going to type remove, that's rm-rf for recursive force, and then .git, and that's going to remove that .git directory. And I've been using git bash this entire series, but just to highlight, these are commands that you would typically use in git bash, which is this type of terminal. Press enter. Now my git directory is gone. I no longer have version control, but I do have the entire project right here. Now I'm going to want version control to push this new repository now back to GitHub, and of course I'm going to need to create a new GitHub repo as well, and then we'll set everything up for CI/CD, that continuous integration, continuous deployment. Now, in a professional environment, you wouldn't just have a main branch, of course. You're going to have a staging branch, you're going to have a project manager, or at least a team lead that's approving everything that's, of course, being pushed up. So you're not going to just work off the main branch, but that's what we're doing as students in a learning environment. We're using free things, and of course we're going to use the free Vercel hosting. It does support some staging, I believe, possibly even for a free account. However, we're just going to use this main branch and push that and deploy it. So now that we have everything here, let's go ahead and create our new Git repository with git init. Now we have a Git directory once again, and all the files should be green because everything is new. Nothing has been added yet. So let's just add it all with git add and a period, meaning all. And now we want to git commit -m, and we can just say first commit. Now we committed everything. So now everything is committed to our main branch in our new repository, and we can check that if we say git branch once again, we should only have the main branch. This is a new repo. Now let's go back to GitHub and create a new repository on GitHub where we can link this to it. And I'm back on GitHub. I'm going to click the little icon up here in the top left, and it's going to take me to the page that has the feed. And what I like on this is I can just click the new button right here, and I'm ready to create a new repository on GitHub. I'm going to call this comp-repair-shop, and it says it's available. I'm going to just leave it public. You may have a free account. I have the option for private because I have a professional account, but if not, either way, public is just fine. Let's go ahead and create the repository. Once we've created the repository, it's going to give you a page like this. We want these last directions here, or push an existing repository from the command line. That's what we have, an existing repository. We can just copy all three of these commands. So let's copy that. Sure, it copies. I guess it doesn't give us a confirmation. But we've copied that. We'll go back to VS Code and of course run this, so then it links our remote to this remote, or it will actually call this the remote. But either way, we're linking our local repository to our GitHub repository. Okay, back in VS Code, I'm going to paste in what we copied. It runs the first two commands automatically when I paste all three at once. And now on this last one, I need to press enter. It's going to push all of that to GitHub, and we'll be able to check it out. So if we go back to GitHub now, we look at this repository, we'll scroll up here and click on comp repair shop. We can verify that all the files are in here. Here's our first commit, just happened, it says 2 minutes ago. And then I scroll down and we don't even have a README file in here, but here's the entire project that we created with that new Git repo we have back on our computer. Now let's go back to our repo and check a couple of things. Okay, back in VS Code, we're back at our repo. Now, when we pull the code down from GitHub, there's a couple of things we're missing. One of those things is the .env.local file. That never gets sent to GitHub. It never should. You don't want to share that. That has your secret environment variables. Now, hopefully you have those in the previous code that we were working on, right? The other chapters and everything you built up. Hopefully you didn't even have to follow these steps that made me clone the code, for example, from GitHub. But if you did, for whatever reason, you need that .env.local file. You can just click on one of these others here and create it once again, .env.local. And this is, of course, only to run it from your local machine, but we will also use this when we deploy because Vercel makes it very easy for us to just paste in a file. So go ahead and get all your values that you had in your .env local if you're following this process. If not, maybe you already had your code ready to go and of course didn't need to clone it, and you don't have to copy those over, but you need all of those environment variables in here. Okay, I have added my environment variables. Now there's one other thing that's missing from your code, but that won't allow you to run your project locally until you do this. So I just want to highlight that as well. We don't have any of the node_modules, all of those dependencies. They're listed in our package.json, but we don't have them. We just have our code. So before we would run this locally again, if we wanted to, you would need to, of course, open up a terminal window. I'll clear this out once again. You want to do npm, you could type install or just I, either one for install, but then you want -- legacy peer deps in this project, at least as it currently is at this current time. Maybe in the future this wouldn't be needed, but this will install that node modules folder that actually contains the code of all your dependencies. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. It's listed in the git ignore. It never gets sent up to GitHub, and you can see it's all grayed out here as well. But I'll let this complete and then I'll come back. Okay, all of the node modules have finished installing as well. Now, if you wanted to run the project here locally, now that you have added your local environment variables and the node modules, you could do that to test it out one more time before we deploy. But right now, we're ready to go to vercel.com and start our deployment. Okay, I'm at vercel.com and we want to click sign up if you don't have an account, or what I'm going to do is click log in. Either way, you should already have a GitHub account if you're following along, and that's free as well. And you can just continue with GitHub and it will authenticate you. And you should have that option when you sign up as well. If you don't, you may need to link your GitHub account after you sign up. It's been a long time for me, so I can't remember exactly what I did at that time. But now I'm logged in. I've got my blog over here for my davegray.code site. But we're going to add a new project. So we'll add new and click project. And here we go. So now we're linked to GitHub already. You should be linked to your GitHub over here too. And you can search the different projects. For me, I think I set it up on a project by project basis instead of linking to everything I have in my GitHub. So it'll probably tell me it can't find it afterwards. I'll say Next.js Full Stack. Actually, that's not what we called it, right? We called it comp, prepare. And yeah, it can't find it anyway. So I need to click on Configure GitHub App. And this always takes me to GitHub where I say, yes, I'm ready to configure. And then I pick out the exact app I want. Now I'm going to enter this authentication code and then we'll come back. Okay, I'm back. And you may or may not have an authentication code hooked up to your account. Either way, that doesn't matter. It's just something that I have to do when I log in. Okay, looking at this page now, it says Vercel installed a long time ago here for me, but it gives me all these different things I can set for this, but it says only select repositories instead of all repositories. So that's why I always have to select one. So I can click select repositories and I can search for it. So comp, pair shop, there it is. I'm going to save those changes. And now it can see my comp repair shop repository here in vercel.com. And I'm going to click import to create this new project. Now it's going to name the project name unless I change it, comp repair shop. I'm on my hobby plan here, which is free. I'll scroll down. It's using the Next.js framework. That's fine. Build and output settings. We're going to have a change here because remember, we're always using that legacy peer deps flag right now. So the install command specifically is going to be just a little different. So to do that, let's click this on button and now we can change the install command. So I'm going to put npm install, then -- legacy - peer -deps, because this is really running the same thing we've seen on our computer. It's going to install all of those dependencies. Now for the environment variables, it says tip, paste a .env above to populate the form. So you can go back to your code, copy your entire .env.local, click in here, and then Control V to paste, or if you right click, you should be able to, yes, paste as well, which is Control V. So I'm going to do that also. Now remember, you shouldn't see mine, I shouldn't see yours. So after you do that, we should have everything filled in, and then we're going to click deploy. And I'll meet you back here after that. Okay, hold on, just wait a second. When you paste those in here, you're going to have 3 variables for kind that are local host. We won't want that. What your project is probably going to end up being is whatever the project name here is, .vercel.app. So what you want to do is replace localhost in those kind URLs with your name for your project. If it's comp repair shop, that's fine, but you may want something else there as well. It may not be available either. If they want to give you something else, maybe I'm taking this name up right now. So that's a possibility. But after that, you want to have .vercel.app. And if not, you can always go into the settings and change it afterwards. But just know that if you change your environment variables, you need to redeploy your project. It needs to rebuild with those values in there. So that's important. The local host won't work when we're deployed. So those 3 kind URLs that use localhost are going to need to have whatever the URL ends up being at Vercel, likely to be project name .vercel.app. Okay, now I'm going to paste my variables in and then I'm going to click deploy and we'll meet back when it's deploying. Okay guys, I have clicked deploy and now we're seeing the rest of this page here that it scrolls down to on Vercel after you click deploy, and it is showing us a build log right here, and we can see more details if we go ahead and open this up, and we can see all the details actually. But one thing I want to talk about here is when we pasted in those environment variables, I said localhost, and I know most would understand, but not everybody, not every student understands everything I intended to say. And I should have said localhost :3000 because on our machine, it was using in development localhost, and then the colon means port 3000. You wanted to replace all of that. In addition, if you didn't notice, On our local machine, it was using HTTP, not HTTPS. But I will show you where you can make those changes if you didn't get those right and need to go back to do that. They're in the settings for the project, and then you will need to redeploy, but it will be important to have those correct. We're also going to change a couple of things in kind. So let's go do that now, then we'll come back and check on our deployment. Okay, I am at my kind.com dashboard. I've already logged in, as you should have done several times throughout this series while building this project. And now that we're logged into the Kind dashboard, we need to go ahead and go to the view details of the computer repair shop project here. Once we're in there, we're going to see an area where we have a couple of URLs, and they're the allowed callback URL and allowed logout redirect URL. So you can see those are localhost 3000. We want to leave these in here just in case we're working in development mode and we still need localhost 3000. Note here that it's also just HTTP, but we're going to need to put in ones that are also allowed in production. So I'm going to put in my URL. Notice it's HTTPS, and then it has my project name .vercel.app. After that, I need to still have /API/auth and kind callback. So I'll just copy that, which is less chance for me to make a typo, but it should have the same ending after localhost 3000, so we'd put it after our app. And there you go. Now down here we need to do the same thing. So we need vercel.app, and on a new line, then we'll put /login. There we go. So these are the two URLs that I need for my project, and this is if Vercel has gone ahead and named it what I had as the name suggested in there. So I'm guessing a little bit that that's what it will be. So yours should probably be different. I don't think we can have the same ones, but this is what you would need to do in kind. Whatever your Vercel project URL ends up being, then you'll need to go ahead and put those in the allowed callback URL and allowed logout redirect URL. Once you've made these changes, scroll all the way down here and click Save as well to make sure it's saved in your project. And that's all we need to adjust in kind for the deployment. Now back at vercel.com, it looks like the deployment completed and everything is fine. It's even showing us a picture of the home page. Gives us a few next steps, and then we can just continue to the dashboard, which is what we want to do. And as I guessed, my project is named comp-repair-shop.vercel.app. And whatever your project name is, as long as it's not taken by somebody else, it should probably be fine there too. So we've got the project deployed. Let's go ahead and make sure we can log in and that everything is working as expected. You can click the link right here, takes us to that page. And of course, we know that was just for the public for Dan's Computer Repair Shop. All the texts are going to go to the login page. And once they do that, they're going to click sign in. And of course, you need to put in the email, whatever the tech's email is that you have in, whoever a tech is that is allowed to log in, or an admin. And I believe I had mine as dave@davegray.codes, should be accepted. And it will send me that email with a code. We'll enter that in, and I'll meet you at the ticket page. And here I am at the ticket page, and you can see the URL above is comp-repair-shop.vercel.app/tickets. Now that I am logged in, so we can search for Jane and see if our app works as expected. And yes, now we've just got the tickets for Jane, so that's good. If we go to customers, maybe we can search customers as well, and I'll search for my name, and there I am in the customer list. Or let's search for all customers, because everybody has the @ symbol in their email. There it is. Everything seems to be working just as a quick glance here. And of course, you could tell me anything that you discover that is not. Make sure to leave comments. I'm always looking forward to any challenges, anything that we can learn about. And of course, join my Discord if you haven't, and we can discuss it there as well. But we're not quite finished yet. There's some more I want to go over, but we have now deployed the project on Vercel, and it is working as expected. I'm now in the Sentry docs, and here it talks about deploying to Vercel and having an integration, and that could be very useful indeed. So as we scroll down here, we see that they link us to the integrations with Sentry here on Vercel.com, and we should see a page like that. So let's go ahead and click over and go to our integration page here, vercel.com/integrations/Sentry. And we've been using Sentry with this project the entire time. So let's go ahead and connect our account, and it says select a team. So let's take a look. I'm at my Dave's projects. This is my hobby account, and that should be okay. And we could say a specific project if we want to, just like I did for what I pulled in to Vercel. So now I want to have the comp repair shop connected to Sentry. So I'm going to click connect account, and it's going to take over. It now logged me into Sentry, where it wants me to connect my projects. So the Vercel project is the comp repair shop, and the Sentry project, well, we had repair shop already, so we can do that. And now it says, please link at least one project to continue. I think we did. Maybe we need to click plus. There we go. Just clicking the plus linked it. Did not update environment variable in Vercel project. Okay, this could be because we already have the next public Sentry DSN in our environment variables in Vercel. So let's go ahead and go back to our project, because I had said I would show you where to put those environment variables if you needed to change them anyway. So let's go to settings, and from settings in our project here in Vercel, we should be able to click environment variables. And then if we scroll down, you should be able to see all of the environment variables. And here's the one that said that couldn't set. So what I'm going to do is delete this one. And I can always reset it if I need to. But you can, of course, add as many as you want to up here. You can put in the key and the value. You can add another and add another. You can import an entire .env.local file or just .env file, whatever you need there. And you can edit all of these here. And of course, they're hidden now, but you can show them if you click the little eye icon. So all of that is very useful. But let's go back and try this. Now that we've deleted that, let's try this integration one more time back here. So let's resume. And we should be able to start over here. Let's pick computer repair shop. Pick repair shop, and let's click plus. Let's see if it works now that we deleted that variable. Oh, we also had a Sentry auth token. I think it's going to do that for each one of these. So let's find out. I'll delete the other Sentry variables and come back. Or maybe I should just do one at a time. So let's go back and delete auth token now. Sentry auth token. Remove. Okay. Try it one more time. Maybe it's going to work. It now worked. So we just needed to delete a couple of those that we already had in there. And now we have linked our comp repair shop Vercel project to repair shop in Sentry. It says complete on Vercel. Okay. We'll go ahead and click that and let it complete. Okay, here's the Sentry integration in Vercel now, and the overview, and it tells us what it's going to do here and what's really going to happen. And we see some of this when we build the project as well. Source maps get loaded to Sentry, and it's really just going to help us find any deployment problems faster that way. So we've got everything linked, and of course, we can check any issues in Sentry, as we have several times along the way in this journey as well. And with this integration complete, we have updated our environment variables. And as I said earlier, anytime you do that, you need to redeploy, so you rebuild your project. Now, we haven't really made any code changes, or we could just make a push from our local repository, which would go to GitHub, and then that would trigger a deployment here on Vercel, since we have linked our GitHub project to Vercel. So that is continuous integration, continuous deployment. But since we haven't made any changes like that, all we really need to do is go into our repair shop project. And here is a deployment right here, but let's find other deployments. We can see a deployment tab up here at the top. So we go there. Here was the previous deployment that I had made. So let's just pick it. and let's go redeploy. From here, yes, we want to redeploy to production, and we'll just click redeploy. Now it's going to use those environment variable values that we put in our settings. So if you changed your others, for example, those kind URLs that needed to be changed to your project URL, for example, in the environment variables, once you've changed those as well, you would need to redeploy, of course, for your project to work. So I'm just showing this, but overall, we have deployed the project. It has worked as expected already. And now I just want to go back to VS Code to cover one last thing. I'm back in VS Code. We have successfully deployed our project. So what could be left? Well, I want to talk about maintenance. Maintenance is a very important thing. A full stack project like this, of this magnitude, has a lot of moving pieces. So we need to be able to check our updates. Now, that doesn't mean we always have to use the latest version. Currently, everything works, and we got rid of any vulnerabilities, which is very important, but we don't have to update everything immediately to the latest version. Sometimes, in fact, it's best that we don't, and we take things steady and easy as we go. So let's go ahead and open up the terminal once again. I'll clear this out. Let's run npx and then npm-check-updates. I've been building this series and this project for about 3 months, so I think some of the things, some of the dependencies we have are not, I wouldn't say outdated, but they aren't the newest. So we want to check those things. We already learned, as I discussed, how the semantic versioning works. We go major, minor, and patch, and we can see, really, I don't quite have this wide enough. Let me hide the file tree. We'll see them all on one line. There we go. So we can see, for example, Zod, we currently have version 3.23.8 installed in our project, but the latest version of Zod is 3.24.1. So there is a new minor version, not just a patch, but a new minor version available. And you might want to do that, but you don't want to just blindly allow all the updates. For example, this npm check updates has a flag you can use to update all, and it reminds you here to upgrade all with this -u. I don't ever recommend that. I recommend checking. As a matter of fact, let me quickly discuss best practices. One thing is always read the changelog and release notes for any package. So when you go to GitHub, for example, for Zod, look over on the right and look at releases. As a matter of fact, I should just show you this right now. So here I am on the Zod GitHub repository, and over here on the right, you see releases, and it says 90 plus releases. We'll just click that, and we should see kind of what has been released here in each commit. So here's the latest, 3.2.14, and the commits. You can see what they're doing with their comments, and that helps. And of course, they're even going over some more details here of the different commits that have happened since we were at 3.23.8, if I remember from VS Code. So this is what we have installed. And since then, we can see what has happened. Now, this looks like a lot, but they're all small little commits. So you just want to see how it impacts. For example, they even note something. This was added to the README, just to note that Drizzle Zod also exists, and that was added to that section of the README. That's nothing that changed how it works with Drizzle Zod, it just acknowledged it. So that's just one example there. But you want to check these releases and release notes to see what does the new release bring to the project. Is it something I should worry about? It shouldn't be a vulnerability, or we would have discovered that already. And at the same time, you want to take it easy and ease into those. Now, I said the best practice, the first thing is to always read the changelog. The next is to review the documentation itself. So if we go back, how I got to the GitHub page for Zod was actually, oh, it looks like it opened it in a new tab. But if I go to zod.dev, this is the documentation itself. Now, if we didn't see it listed already in the changelog, breaking changes, like if you go to a new major version, but there could be a breaking change in a minor version, you want to check all the documentation, any changes, and of course you want to check your project as you install those. And as I said, and let me go back to VS Code for this, I recommend never upgrading all at once. I wouldn't do that. I would do everything incrementally. Test those changes as you go. So if we scroll up here, I don't see any broken things that are any major changes. I see minor and then patch changes here. So you might want to check those out. However, Drizzle, I will say this, Drizzle kind of looks at these minor updates, even though it's not a major. They're even not at a 1 yet. They're all 0 here. So these are still possibly big, possibly breaking changes when they move from what we currently have installed 35.3 when this project began just 3 months ago to now 38.3. There could be some changes there. I wouldn't just blindly make that upgrade or update. But you can check all of these different things out in the project. And this is what I would recommend going forward, is just checking those one at a time. Project maintenance, you do need to keep up with that some, but things should work as they are now. But it is always good to stay up on the latest and see what could actually make your project better, if not more secure as well. So test all of those changes and make those updates incrementally, but test them out as you go. And now all I can say is, wow, guys, thank you so much for hanging with me throughout all 13 chapters of this Next.js project. Now, is any project ever really complete? No, I don't think they are. I think we could always add more. It's a non-exhaustive list. I want to receive your recommendations and requests in the comments. I want to see and know how this project went for you. Please give me that feedback. Also, while this series is now over, I do plan to extend this project by creating some additional premium videos. So I want to add extras like modals with intercepted routes, an admin dashboard, sending email notifications to customers, ticket progress tracking, and even billing with a Stripe integration. Now, I'll be announcing these additions on my email list as they are available. So you can sign up for my email list at courses.davegray.codes, and you can always visit that site for the latest announcements as well. And congratulations once again on completing the core features of this Next.js Full Stack project. A quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider, Sean Lynch and Gregory Perry are senior patrons, and all of my junior patrons, Isaac, Will, Heath, Stacy, Valeb, Abe, Javier, Michael, Malik, thank you all so very much. You're helping me reach my goals. And if you'd like to learn more about my Patreon, check it out at patreon.com/davegray. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection. And a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.